Good day and welcome to the first edition of One-on-One with Swope Health. I'm your host, Eric Wesson. I want to thank Jaron Raven for the opportunity to broadcast this show. My guest this morning is none other than Jim Grandad Nunnelly, well known in the community as the Monday Nighters writer. So, Jim, thanks so much for joining us.
And boy, it's a privilege, honestly. And you and I have had many conversations, and I guess we'll have one of those today.
Yes. So, how did you get started with the Monday Nighters?
It was purely by accident. I had come from Columbia, Missouri. One of my coworkers said they were having a football watching on Monday Night Football, and it happened to just be the very first Monday Night Football telecast in 1970. So I went, and I was so fascinated with the knowledge and the upbeat of the men that were in that group that I decided I would write about them. It's really that simple. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned it to Ms. Bluford. At that time, she said, well, why don't you just do it? And so I've been doing it ever since. It's now 52 years.
52 years.
52.
And you all have met for 52 years?
Exactly. Doing the football season on Monday night. And we sometimes don't even get a chance to watch the football game. It's so engulfed with conversation and whatever. And I think the most fascinating part about them is that these are all accomplished people, mm-hmm. and they're just kind of together. And we often talk about women who get together and chit-chat. Well, this is kind of a men's version of a women's chit-chat. And
mm-hmm.
But there's some awful good stuff that passes through my ears.
Yeah, I've been to several of them.
Oh, yeah, you've been there.
The food was great. I think it was Ike had those greens.
Right.
Those greens was smoking.
That's right.
But yeah, that was. It's always good to read you all's column in the paper and know that after 52 years, you all are still together. I think one person has died in the 52 years.
Two people have died, and we're all octogenarians now. We're all at least 80. I'm the youngest one. I'll be 80 this summer.
Okay.
But everybody else has gone past that. So
you're the baby of the group.
I'm the baby. Yeah. I've outlived them all.
But your passion, even though you like football and you love talking about the Chiefs, your passion is health.
Exactly. And my knowledge base is health as well. And that allows me sometimes to sort of interlace the two. Mm-hmm. Or anything else that's going on from a community point of view. And you being the editor, you know how I write. I'm kind of mm-hmm. a storyteller of sorts, but more importantly, I just kind of like to interlace it with current events and because that's what we talk about. I mean, you'd be surprised. These are educators. These are accomplished people. And they have very opinionated views. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of capture on that. They're unafraid. They're fearless. And especially when they get to be 80.
Yeah, you pretty much say whatever you want to at 78.
That's right.
So when we talk about healthcare and we talk about it in the Black community, healthcare is economics. And we've talked, you and I have talked about this a number of times. So how profitable or how economically based is healthcare in the Black community?
Well, it's not very. It needs to be more. But there are a couple of examples of things that have been built around the health base and developed economically. I mean, Swope is one part of that here on this large campus on which we are now. I mean, it started out as a health center, and of course, you got other economics into it. I think it's amazingly simple that healthcare is not going to be sustained unless there is an economic upholder or base, if you must, because you might get healthy or you might get disease-free, but you'll be sick again because there's no economic base to hold it back together. And that's why health should be the centerpiece of any development and not just to add on.
And one of the things we talked about too in our conversations, and I really started paying attention to it after we talked about it, was kidney dialysis centers. Mm-hmm. And there's there are quite a few in the black community.
That's right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because there's a lot of kidney disease, and there's a lot of money in in kidney diseases. In other words, first of all, Medicare pays for it, so it's not like a question of whether or not you're going to get paid for the dialysis. But the second part is that it's deeply rooted disease. I mean, it's just big in our community, and so people have moved in on it. Well, to me, when there's a kidney dialysis, it comes up several red signs. The first red sign is that we're sick, but the second part is that we're not making money on it. And I know it sounds harsh that we should say so clearly, but one of the ways to get healthy is to have an economic base to go with the care. I mean, in other words, if you take Johnson County, you don't have near the disease levels that we have, but you have a surrounding base, so people are healthier. I mean, they eat healthier, they do healthier. But in our area, if you don't support the economic sidekick, then you're not going to have health care very long, or at least it's not going to be effective.
So when we talk about health and all the things that are associated with it economically, we have to look at our grocery stores.
That's right.
And I look back over several years, and we have gas stations that sell a pack of bologna and a loaf of bread and some crackers, and our young people think that that's a store. But in actuality, and I've heard some even say that they were going to the grocery store and they were going to a gas station. So how much of a role does not having fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh meat, fresh dairy product, how much is that is a cause of some of the health concerns that we see?
Well, it will vary from individual to individual. Scientists are talking about that food is medicine, and therefore you should look at a grocery store as being a pharmacist rather than as a grocery store, because the basic need or the basic subsider of disease or attacker of disease is food. In other words, we could literally eat ourselves out of disease. We really could.
Really?
We literally could. And the people who have done this, but they've gone all the way back to eliminating meats and eliminating dairy products and eliminating various things that cause various diseases in our body. And there are many charts that show that if you don't do this, or if you drink a lot of pop, for example, I mean, you can expect that you're going to have some kidney concerns at some point, because at some point it just gets overflow. The heart specialists have now come to a part in their life where they say that, the high blood pressure is connected to the residue of food that you eat that the heart cannot process. So it just builds up, and that's where the pressure comes from, on the pressure on the heart. So when the heart has pressure, it wears out, but it wears out because what you're feeding it is not conducive to continue the lower pressure and the high operating rate. And so it's that kind of simplicity that we must practice. But it's not so much as if we just improved our health, we could live a lot longer. But it's like you mentioned about the dialysis center. The dialysis center is an end-stage disease, meaning you're likely not to get better from it. And that just means that, so as long as you live and as long as you're going to take dialysis, just think of the money that's being made or poured into your community, or in this case, not poured back into your community, that continues to make us unhealthier. Now, I'm not trying to say that doctors are needless, not saying that at all. I'm just saying that in order for us to achieve some respectable level of health, we have to participate in our own health. And participating means that we must avoid certain foods, but we also must recognize that our surroundings, our economic surroundings, are equally as important as the medicine that we take.
Interesting. One of the things I thought about when we're talking about the grocery stores, I had a friend of mine tell me one time that we eat on the outside because that's where the healthiest stuff is. That's where we need to eat, is around the outside edges of the store. That's where the vegetables are, the meats are, the fish are. So when you're talking to young people, what attracts their attention to going to the healthy part of the store versus going down the aisle that has the sugar in the cereal and all of those things that aren't healthy for us?
Well, one is just color alone. I mean, just if it's colorful, it's attractive. And of course, most of the vegetables are very attractive. As a matter of fact, they are now doing studies with young children and babies that they tend to be quite attractive to color. I don't know why, and I don't want to explain it in any other terms than what I'm saying now. It's attractive. But the point I'm saying is that some special effort went into getting that to be some of the first things that we see when we go into the store. So we know it's there if we want it. Now, the problem is when you go into a gas station or a convenience store or whatever, everything unhealthy is like staring you right in the face.
Energy drinks and chips.
There you go. And also, it adds to shoplifting.
Really?
It's interesting. And when I was in the prosecutor's office for 25 years, I tried to show that convenience stores were contributing to the poor health. Because, you see, the shoplifting is what becomes worthwhile or lower market value on the streets. So if you shoplift some lemonade, it'll be better than you can't shoplift or you don't have a value on some skim milk, for example. I mean, so you see the shoplifting kind of enhances economically what is not good for us. And I had to do that. It took me 6 months to convince a whole august people to see what I was saying. But I was saying that these are not only bad for the crime, it's also bad for our health because these things are staring us right in the face and they're easily shopliftable and they usually have a market value on the streets, and that's what we eat. I mean, and we continue to eat in a unsophisticated way, or at least an unhealthy way, and eventually we develop diseases, or at least our body does not respond to the health that we need for it to. It doesn't activate. And you and I have talked about myself. If you notice, some people say, well, why you wear these MU clothes all the time? That's all. Ain't you got no more clothes? And the real reason is that it tells me that I'm the same weight as I was 20 years ago.
Right.
Because I haven't grown out of it. Now, I've grown out of style, but I haven't grown out of the clothes. As a matter of fact, you can tell right now that these are a little baggy. But the idea of just not getting it, because obesity itself is kind of bad, but it's what you did to get obese that's even worse. And so you have to kind of keep this in mind. For example, I'm on a committee now for the a university who's studying disparities in healthcare. And so I asked them where in their big, huge health system was there anything for nutrition. And they didn't even have a nutritionist. Now, so that means that we are so imbued with sickness that we can't even think health. Do you get what I'm saying? I mean, we know what's wrong, but we don't embrace what's right or what's healthy for you. And there lies in the balance. And the second part of that, the economic that gets into this, we hear this word equity. Now, and it's a misleading word, Eric. It really is, because people think it's equality. It's not equality. Equity is a financial term. It means that I got as much interest in things being well or good as the person who's investing in it. There's equity. I got the people are just as involved in its goodness as it is helping it get along. So there's equity in there. That equity comes out when you are no longer looking for what's wrong with me, but helping me get right. And one of the ways you can do that, is just look and see where the money is going, where these health institutions, which is my problem with the dialysis things that we talked about last time. If there are 9 dialysis centers here, who's getting hired? Where are they buying their plumbing? And you see, if that money continues to go outside the community along with our health, we're in terrible trouble. We look up 25 years later and we've not moved 1 inch. And you see, if that's what equity is to me, is that me and you together are going to work on our health, and not just me help you get rich. You see, all right. I hate to be so blatantly.
Hey, that's real talk.
Right.
You're listening to One on One with Swope. I'm your host, Eric Wesson. Swope last year, Jim, served 45,000 Kansas Citians in various conditions that they needed help in, be it dental, be it eyewear, be it whatever they needed health with. And that's fabulous that they do that. And they do that in all of their centers throughout the metropolitan area.
Right.
So let's kind of shift gears again, because this has to do with health as well. You served as the founder, I would say, of Combat as far as the prosecutor's office and putting it together. So how was that experience, and how did that come about for you?
Well, first of all, it was an experience in healthcare, and many people don't get that part because our people were sick from the criminology caused by drug usage. And I don't mean that there might have been an economic interest in it, but nonetheless, I'm saying that I consider them to be sick rather than just criminal, or at least all people were not criminal in drug usage. And so I made the assumption that if we made treatment centers available, that they would get well, but we would also reduce the crime. Now, let me give you a perfect example. There's a couple of neighborhoods in this city that at one time were horrible as far as crime and people didn't get well, they were sick. And we provided health care in the way of drug treatment. And now those communities are healthy. It took about 30 years to do it, but you look at them now and you see them. And I'm always thrilled to go in the prosecutor's office and show people the difference that, that drug usage can make, or the havoc it can reach on people. But it's a health issue and not just a criminal issue. And it's that kind of fusion that, that wherever I go, that's where I take a little health care with me and fuse it in with whatever I'm supposed to do. Now, the problem is most people think I'm a lawyer because I worked in the prosecutor's office, don't know anything about law. But I was fortunate enough to be able to fuse a little health care in there. And this county is known worldwide for being progressive, to be able to treat people for drugs and not just send them to jail. And I'm very proud of that.
And that's one of the things that you were able to do, was show people, hey, these are good people. They just have a health issue being addicted to drugs.
You got it.
And
you said better than me.
So I think that's commendable. And that's kind of a vision that people don't really stop and think about when they think about combat. Most people think about it being punitive, but I think you changed that course of action, as the way they wanted to go, into the way that was practical. And so I commend you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And the grounds on which we sit right now was once wasteland, and it became a treatment center, and thousands of people came through this center and still come to get treatment and get their lives together and restored. And the part they don't think about is the economic complement to that, because there's jobs involved in the treatment, there's family orientation involved in the treatment, there's community involvement in the treatment. All of those which are economic principles that enhance the city and enhance the health care that was given. Again, my point, you can't have one without the other.
So in doing that, you kept a lot of people from going to prison. Were there any success stories in that process, or do you remember, or do you gauge any of those people that say, walk up to you in the store and say, hey, you saved my life by, instead of sending me to prison, you sent me to a treatment program. Now I'm a rocket scientist. Do you ever see any cases like that?
Not quite that dramatic. I do. Just last month, I was sitting in Red Lobster, and so prices are up pretty high. So I ate pretty good. But when I got ready to go, somebody said, somebody's taking care of your bill.
Wow.
And so I said, who was it? And I didn't know anybody in the place. And then when I got ready to leave, the guy walked up to me and he said, you don't know that you saved my life. And I said, oh, like I should know that as well as you. And it turned out that I was in the courtroom with him and gave him an opportunity, or helped give him an opportunity to get well as opposed to be drug ridden. And today, this guy is a general contractor and making quite a bit of money.
Well, that's good.
Mm-hmm. That just happened. But I'm sure there are countless others. But I'm worried more about the children never getting to it in the first place, the young people. I mean, that's really my passion.
Okay, and so that you had that passion through Generation Rap.
Exactly.
And so people will remember you as Jim Grandad Nunnelly in Generation Rap, and your wife being Nana, that you often talk about. So how do you correlate the children in Generation Rap and your passion for children? And how are you going now that you kind of retired from Generation Rap? How are you touching so many young people still today?
Oh, my goodness. That is a good question. I still have 74 people that I'm still actively involved in their life or career. Mm-hmm. Now, most of them were at one time Generation Rappers that have just stayed in our life. Just this Memorial Day, we had what we called a little family gathering cookout. And 3 Generation Rap kids showed up just because they were back from school, had graduated, and just wanted to say thanks. It's that kind of propulsion that kind of keeps me going, but I don't know when to stop. And so one of these days I will have to do that. But it is, it's too cheap to say it's revealing and it's heartwarming and all of that. It's much more than that. It's kind of like knowing that if you fight hard enough and prepare yourself and do the things necessary, you can move the needle. Maybe you won't solve the problem, but you can move the needle.
And with that, I couldn't think of a better closing statement and comment to have our viewers take with them throughout the week. My guest this morning has been Jim Grandad Nunnelly, and I want to thank him so much for being a part of the inaugural show of Swope One-on-One with Swope Health. I'm your host, Eric Wesson. Until next week, peace.